Hello, my name is Maylin, and starting off with my module 4 discussion and identifying part of the prompt, it asks us to identify two dominant ideas, which I am identifying deficit perspectives and exclusionary practices. The authors, both Yoso and Love, challenge deficit perspectives by telling us that students of color and students with disabilities should not be viewed as just their disabilities, but also the strength and the knowledge they have. For example, Yoso's concept of community cultural wealth tells us that marginalized communities have types of capital such as aspirational, familial, social, and resistant capital that are often ignored in schools. Instead of assuming the students need to be fixed, educators should recognize and build on these existing strengths because not every student is the same. And as Love tells us that schools should move beyond simply helping students survive unjust systems and instead promote educational freedom where students are really encouraged. The authors also challenge traditional teaching methods that place teachers as the authority and students as passive learners. Freire, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, argues that what he calls the banking concept of education, where teachers simply deposit information into students instead of actually engaging with the material in a meaningful way. And he explains education thus becomes an act of depositing. This is the banking concept of education on page 72. So Freire argues that real learning happens through participation and collaboration, stating that knowledge emerges only through invention and reinvention as people actively engage with the world and each other. He's telling us how important it is for peers and students to have interaction and curriculum that leads them to engaging, not just listening to the teacher or reading off PowerPoints. It's really important to have that collaboration in order to really have valuable learning. And if I could change any aspect of education, I would change teaching practices to make classrooms more inclusive and effective. I would focus on building lessons within community cultures and experiences and promote participation, not just depositing information like Freire talks about, because this is when education tends to become ineffective and just a cycle. I think students who are given more time for collaboration and are encouraged to participate get a way more meaningful and valuable education. And although I think an inclusive classroom like this would be effective, it would be challenging to set up change in general, with teachers needing new training, different curriculum and standards, and then also changing in overall school policies. I think this would be something difficult and probably a long process to do, just because the educational system is already set up in a certain way that many don't want to change, because people have thought that if it's worked for this long, but I think that it's a outdated educational system. But one benefit I do think that would come from this idea would be students would feel more a part of the material and making them more engaged and motivated to learn, wanting to actually come to school and share about themselves, have free roaming ideas and discussions. Overall, I feel students would be more encouraged to actively participate, therefore retaining knowledge a lot better in this kind of setting. As I said, I think this is really the new way to education. As times are always changing, I think that the educational systems also need to move with the changes of society and not just stick with ideas of many years ago, because things change and societies change.